Hello, thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Jordan Gum, and I am the Digital Content Specialist for the Center for Disability Studies at the University of Delaware. I'm happy to introduce today's speaker, Laurie Allen. In her role as Senior Accessibility Technology Evangelist, Laurie works with enterprise customers on creating inclusive work environments, building accessibility into products, and creating new, innovative solutions for people with disabilities. With Laurie, we will discover the accessibility features in Microsoft 365, learn how to create content that's accessible to everyone, and explore the fantastic resources available to support you. Laurie is a technology veteran with 25 plus years of diverse experience. I would like to review a few housekeeping items before we get started. We have two ASL interpreters with us today, Pamela and Kelly. Their video feed will be spotlighted when their cameras are turned on. If you require closed captioning, you can enable this feature from your toolbar. If you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box. We will be referring to your questions at several points throughout today's presentation. Again, thank you so much for being with us today, and please help me welcome Laurie.
Thanks so much, Jordan. I'm thrilled to be here with you today to talk about accessibility and tools that you can use throughout your day. And as we're getting started, we've got several accessibility features that are available for you. Jordan mentioned live captions, so you can go to your More menu at the top of your application and select live captions. That turns captions on just for you. If you want to use magnifier, you can click your Windows key and plus sign to zoom in. Windows key escape will get you out. We're presenting today in PowerPoint Live, and by doing so, if you're using a screen reader, you will be able to read the slides. So just a first tip, if you share your screen and show your slides, the screen reader can't read your slides or consume your slides. But if you use PowerPoint Live to present, a screen reader can read your slides. Also, at the bottom of your screen below the slides, you'll see another More Actions option. And if you click on that, you can turn on high contrast. So as we're getting started, Microsoft's mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And by every person, we mean every person, regardless of ability. We believe that accessibility is a fundamental right. It breaks down barriers and it opens doors for people with disabilities. And so I'd like to start by level setting who we're talking about when we're talking about the disability community. 1.3 billion people in the world have a disability. And that could be a permanent disability, and I'll use myself as an example. I'm a quadriplegic. My level of paralysis starts just below my shoulder. So I have some arm function, no hand function, and I use a wheelchair. So I've got a visible permanent disability. And I think often when we think of disabilities, that's what we think of. But 75% of disabilities are non-apparent or invisible. I think neurodiversity, different types of learning disabilities. 1 in 5 people are neurodivergent. And if we narrow that down to Gen Z, it's 53%. Gen Alpha, more than 70% of people identify as neurodivergent. So this is the future of our workforce and why our products, all of our products, need to be accessible for everyone. So let's start with talking about some productivity tools. So at Microsoft, we take a build it in, not bolt it on approach. We build accessibility in during the design phase of our product development lifecycle. And we don't build for the disability community, we build with the disability community. We don't make assumptions about what people need. We ask them and we work with them directly. And so there are a lot of features that you've got available in M365 products today that you may not be aware of. And I'll start in Windows. In Windows 11, we believe this is the most accessible operating system we've ever released. And we've added a few things in Windows 11 that I'd love to highlight. In Windows 10, we have live captions that you can turn on that will caption any audio coming through your laptop. But in Windows 11, we enhanced that. Now you can set the window to be at the top of the screen, the bottom of your screen. You can float it on your screen. You can also customize the color palette. You can select a different text color, a different background color, and you can change the size of the window. In Windows 10, we have speech recognition, and this is a tool that I use every day. It enables me to navigate my laptop using my voice. So I can open apps, close apps, toggle through apps, and convert speech to text. In Windows 11, we added voice access. It works in a very similar way to what you're used to with speech recognition. It's just built on a little bit more modern technology stack. Narrator is a screen reader built right into the operating system that we've had in Windows for quite some time. And if you've ever heard a screen reader, it sounds very mechanical. And what we added in Windows 11 are natural sounding voices for you to choose from. And we recognize that many people who use the screen reader use a third party like NVDA or JAWS, which work with our applications. But we do have an option built right into the OS. And then finally, focus mode. This is a great feature that I should probably use a little bit more often than I do. It enables us to either start a focus mode on the fly or schedule one, and it basically puts us into do not disturb. It mutes all of those disruptions we get all day, every day. And if you have a Spotify account, you can link that account to your focus mode. And when you go into focus mode, it will automatically start playing your Spotify playlist. So moving into some of the productivity tools by product, and this is not a comprehensive list, but I just want to give you a feel for some of the tools that are available. And at the end of this deck, I've got lots of links for you to go discover more on your own. So in Windows, you can do things like adjust your text size and adjust your mouse pointer size. I've got my mouse pointer set to be larger and pink. It makes it easier for me to see, and it makes it easier for others to see when I'm doing demos. I mentioned narrator and magnifier, but contrast themes is a really interesting way to select a different color palette, a more muted color palette. So think grayscale. And when I select that contrast theme, it gets applied to all of my applications. And I can customize those colors as well to select the colors that work best for me. Color filters is another really great tool. It was built for people who are colorblind. You can select your specific type of color blindness, and it will apply the appropriate color palette for you across all of your apps. And we've got other additional color filters that we added in Windows 11, including things like grayscale. Moving into PowerPoint, if you've not used Designer, I encourage you to do so. It is magic. It basically leverages AI to read your content and recommend designs. Now, this was built for people with mobility disabilities like me, but it benefits everyone. This is a great example of when we build with the disability community, everyone benefits. So as I'm typing content into my presentation, it continually consumes that content, leveraging AI to refine the design to align best with my content. It gives us all time to focus on building robust content rather than making pretty slides. Translator is a tool that we may not think of as an accessibility feature, but if I'm creating content in English and sending it to native Spanish speakers, it might be more difficult for them to consume. So we have Translator built throughout several of our applications. Dictate is another feature that we have built across several of our applications. So if I'm not using that voice access or screen recognition, speech recognition, I can simply click on my Dictate icon in my application and start speaking, and it's going to convert speech to text. Rehearse with Coach is another great tool in PowerPoint that many people are not aware of. So if you experience anxiety when you're presenting to a group, you can go into Rehearse with Coach mode, start presenting your slides. It puts you into presentation mode, and it gives you real-time feedback. Things like you're speaking too quickly, you're using filler words, you're reading your slides. And then at the end, it gives you a comprehensive report. So it's just a great way to get comfortable with your presentation skills. Moving over into Word, another feature that we have in several of our products is called Read Aloud. And again, if I'm not using a screen reader, I can click on my Read Aloud icon, and it's going to read out content on my Outlook email or in my Word document. And this is the one that I'll use, not necessarily related to a disability, but if I'm at the end of the day, I've got a long document that I'm trying to get through, I'll turn on Read Aloud just to help with my reading comprehension. And then I won't go through all of these because we've talked about a lot of them, but I like to give you a couple of different ways to think about and to find these productivity tools. So of course, on our support side, we've got the features within the applications, but we also have sections within our support site that give you productivity tools by category. So for example, I might go into the mobility section to say, to look for all of the features across our products that help my specific type of disability. And again, I've got links at the end of the slide or the end of this deck that we'll share out with you. But one application I do like to highlight here is our Seeing AI app. And this is a mobile phone app built with and for the blind and low vision community. And it basically narrates the world around us. It can read text, it can read signs, it can tell you what currency you're holding in your hand. I can scan a menu and it will not only read out the items on the menu, but I can query what are the vegetarian items on this menu? What are the desserts on this menu? And it's going to isolate what I've asked for. And recently we added Find My Things. And basically, if I have something that I drop all the time or lose, like my keys, I can take a picture of those keys, store it in the Seeing AI app, and when I turn on the app, I can scan the room. It's going to identify where my keys are, and it's going to use spatial audio cues to guide me to my keys. Moving over into Teams, over the past couple of years, we've added a lot of additional accessibility features into Teams. And I love to tell some of the product stories behind them, starting with sign language view. We have accessibility architects within each of our product teams, many of whom have a disability. So they're bringing that lived experience into our product making. And sign language view is a great example. One of our architects is deaf and uses a sign language interpreter. He would join a call. There would be 40 people on the call. Everyone has their cameras on. He's paging through all of the screens to try to find his interpreter to pin her. And now he's missed the first couple of minutes of the meeting. So now what he can do is specify his sign language interpreter in his team settings. Anytime she joins a call, she's automatically pinned in a larger high resolution window in the same place on his screen every time. So he doesn't have to go through that exercise of finding her and pinning her. Blur background is another great feature that comes from the disability community, and I'm using Blur today. And how many of us used Blur, of course, during the pandemic when we were all working from home and we didn't want people to see how messy our home offices were behind us. But it came from an engineer who's deaf and reads lips. She would join a video call and ask people to dim the lights behind her so that she could more easily focus on reading their lips. She brought that idea to a hackathon, and out of it came Blur background that we all benefit from and use today. The adaptive kit is not software, but a really cool accessibility product or tool. And basically, it's a set of really functional stickers. So they have raised patterns, and I'll give you an example of the port indicators. These stickers have raised patterns like an X, a circle, a dash, and I can place one of the stickers by my USB port, and I can place the corresponding patterned tab around my USB cable. So if I'm blind or have low vision, it's more easy. I can more easily find which cable goes into which port. The opener support is one that I use. I can stick it on the top of my laptop, and there's a thumb hole that I can get my thumb through to open my laptop because I can't open my laptop without assistance. I have a colleague who also has limited hand function, and he used to carry a fork around in his laptop bag that he would jam into his laptop to open the lid so he didn't have to ask for help. Not a super safe way to open a laptop, and it certainly does not make the IT team happy. So we're very happy that now we have these opener supports to help us. The adaptive accessories are another really great tool, ones that I use. And this is another great product story. We've got a designer whose daughter has cerebral palsy, and she had trouble interacting with her laptop because her hand would fall off her mouse, and he thought there has to be a better way. So he brought that idea to a hackathon, and out of it came the adaptive mouse. And so we basically took the guts of the mouse out, so the two buttons and the scroll bar, and we worked with a third party to custom 3D print different form factors of mouse tails. So you can select the tail that works best for your mobility needs and attach it to the mouse. We also built adaptive buttons, and one of them is called a D-pad, and this is one that I use. It has 8 switches or 8 touch points on it that I can program to do whatever I need them to do. I can't hold 3 keys down concurrently, so I've got one that will do Control-Alt-Delete. I can even program a macro. So I have a macro that opens up my accessibility settings, and it toggles on voice access for me. So really, really useful tools that I use every single day. And of course, we can't have a conversation about technology today without talking about Copilot. And just for some context, I sit on our central accessibility team at Microsoft, and many of us have a disability. We were given early access to Copilot to test across 3 different things. First, the usability of the application itself. Does it work with a screen reader? Can I navigate it using just my keyboard? We also were testing the data models. Are the data models inclusive of the voice of disability? And are we training bias out of models? So for example, if I prompt Copilot with, I have a mobility disability, what tools do you have that can support me? It has to understand what a mobility disability is, and it has to know what tools are available to support that type of disability. That's the voice of disability we want to ensure is represented in the model. But it shouldn't respond with, I'm sorry you have a disability. That's the bias we're trying to train out of models. And along the way, we started documenting how we were benefiting from using Copilot. And I'll give you a few examples. I've got a colleague who's a brilliant writer, but she has difficulty getting started if she's looking at a blank Word document because she's got dyslexia. So she uses Copilot to generate a first draft of the document. Then if she gets stuck along the way, she can use Inspire Me in Word, and it will leverage AI to consume the previous content and then write the next paragraph. So it keeps her in her flow, keeps her going. Our disability policy officer, as you can imagine, reads lots of long, complicated documents and is also dyslexic. So she'll use Copilot to summarize documents and to simplify the language. I have a colleague who is autistic, and he would tell you that his emails can come across as sounding a little bit harsh or abrupt. So he uses Copilot in Outlook to soften the tone of his emails. Another colleague who's autistic would say that she isn't always sure when to ask questions in a meeting, and she might not know what questions to ask. So in the flow of the meeting, she'll ask Copilot when to ask a question, and sometimes she'll even ask what questions she should ask. I mentioned I have a mobility disability. I can't type on a traditional keyboard. So in meetings, I would have to remember what was said, what the action items were, and then find time during my day to dictate my notes, which is very stressful. And now I've got Teams meeting recap, which summarizes my meetings and gives me the action items. And so I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to find that time, and I don't have to stress out about missing something. Moving over into vision, I've got a colleague who is blind, and if someone sends her an inaccessible document, she'll ask Copilot to summarize it, and it does so in an accessible way. Another colleague would say that he, for the first time in his career, is able to create beautiful, professional-looking PowerPoint presentations without a sighted assistant. Recently, we partnered with EY to do a study to measure the impact of Copilot on people who are disabled or neurodivergent. And of course, we expected to see productivity gains. We've seen that in previous studies. But what this study really emphasized was the human impact of Copilot on employees. And we'll share out this link to the study as well. But just a few of the statistics. 91% see Copilot as a helpful assistive technology. 85% believes it creates a more inclusive workplace, and 76% report that it helps them thrive at work. And some of the main drivers that we saw in the study were that it removes barriers. And I'll use myself as an example. My barrier was not being able to take notes during a Teams meeting. That was a huge barrier for me that Copilot has removed. Of course, we all have gained productivity by leveraging Copilot, but enhanced meaning is where I really want to emphasize the human impact. This is making people feel like they can take on additional work that they might have not been comfortable before. It helps them feel like they're included. It helps them feel like they can participate more fully in a meeting. And as part of this, we had a lot of quotes. There were 300 participants in the survey, and we had over 500 quotes. But one that really resonated with me was someone who is neurodivergent saying that they would shy away from taking on certain projects or certain tasks within their team because they were afraid they would not be able to succeed. And now with Copilot, they feel like they have the tools they need to take on these projects to be successful. They're doing so, and they're receiving recognition from their peers and from their leadership. That is the power of Copilot for accessibility. And then I just want to take a moment to expand on that a little bit to talk about broader generative AI and what we're seeing with AI helping us create inclusive experiences. We partnered recently with the Rijksmuseum, which is a museum in Amsterdam that has over 1 million pieces of artwork. And they make this the art available on their website for everyone to experience. But if you're blind or have low vision, that's difficult, if not impossible. And it's also impossible to create descriptions for 1 million pieces of art to describe it out for a screen reader, for example. But they've leveraged generative AI, computer vision, to create these rich, incredibly rich descriptions of these images. So now everyone is included in this art experience. And so what I'm encouraged by is the ease at which and speed at which we can create inclusive experiences for everyone. And I won't read out this slide, but we created 6 scenarios for people who are disabled or neurodivergent and how they're leveraging Copilot throughout their day. And these came from our Microsoft employees, so lived experience. But one I want to highlight on a day in the life of someone who's blind is if someone sends you an image that's not accessible, so for example, it doesn't have that descriptive text that I mentioned, you can drop it into Copilot chat and it's going to describe the image for you. And in fact, I'm using that now to create alternative text anytime I'm creating a presentation or sending a Word document or an email with an image in it. I pop that image right into chat and it gives me that description. So I'm going to shift gears, but before I do, I'm going to pause to ask if there are any questions or comments. If you have interesting ways that you're leveraging some of these tools, I'd love to hear that. If you're learning about tools you didn't know about, let us know.
Laurie, I don't think there's any questions. I think we're good to go.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about accessible content. While it's super important to understand what productivity features are available for all of us to use every day, I think it's equally important to talk about how to build accessible content. And I'll go back to that number of 75% of disabilities are non-apparent. We're sending content out to our colleagues and customers every day that might not be as accessible as it could be. And we may not know they have a disability. So I think it falls to all of us to proactively build accessible content. And I'll give you just a few tips and tricks throughout some of the applications. You're going to hear me say this a few times, but run Accessibility Checker. That's the most important thing we can do because it's going to highlight any accessibility issues we've introduced into our content. And I'll talk in a couple of minutes about a new tool that we have that's going to make that even easier. But in Word, if you are leveraging the built-in headings and styles, those are inclusive by design. So rather than making font larger and bolding it to indicate a header, actually use that header that's built right into the styles because a screen reader can recognize that that's a header. We mentioned alternative text. In Word and PowerPoint, if you insert an image into the document, Word will leverage AI to generate alt text. Now, it's not perfect. Still do go in and check it, but it will attempt to add that alt text in for you. Add meaningful hyperlink text. So don't just say click here because a screen reader user is not going to know where here is or where they're being directed to go. So be sure that that hyperlink text is meaningful. Color contrast is the most common accessibility issue that we see. And what I mean by that is, let's say, a light colored font, like a pale yellow font on a white background. That's difficult for people who have low vision, people who are neurodivergent to read. So make sure you've got high contrast colors that you've selected from. And what we've added in Word is the ability to toggle on high contrast only colors. So you can toggle that on and then any color you select for your font will be high contrast. And avoid conveying information with color alone. For example, if I create a to-do list and Mary's tasks are red and Bob's tasks are green, if Bob has color blindness, he's not going to know which tasks are his. So be sure that you're adding, verbiage or icons or some other indicator besides color. Moving into PowerPoint, an additional feature here is reading order. And what I mean by that is the order in which you want the elements of your slide to be read out by a screen reader. So I'm showing a slide now that has several elements on it. It's got a title, 2 images, and 2 content blocks. So I would want it read out as title first, describe the first image, read this first content block. Describe the second image, read the second content block. And PowerPoint attempts to put each element in the right reading order, but you can always go in and check it, and it will highlight it or flag it if it thinks the order is not correct. So for example, your title should always be first, and if it's not, it's always going to flag that. But when you click on reading order, it pops up a pane on the right-hand side of your application, and it lists out each element, and you can simply drag and drop. So it's real easy to get those into the right order. Make sure each one of your slides has a unique title because the screen reader will read that out first. And of course, we encourage you to have plenty of white space on your slide and use a larger font. We recommend 18 point. And again, this benefits everyone. No one wants to read a slide with 100 words on it or 47 images. So it benefits everyone. And then also be sure that if you've got a video embedded, that you've added closed captions to those videos. Moving over to Excel, and I know Excel gets a little bit complicated because we get these really complicated spreadsheets, but where possible, avoid splitting and merging cells, nesting tables. Make sure you've got content in all of your cells, that you don't have blank rows, blank columns, and make sure you've got content in that A1 cell because that's where a screen reader is going to start reading from. And similar to slide titles, give each worksheet a unique name and delete any extra worksheets that you're not using. And then a couple of things in Outlook that are unique. In Outlook, it does not add alt text to your images by default. That's a setting that you can turn on in your accessibility settings. So I encourage you to go into your accessibility settings and turn on two things. One, add alt text automatically. And two, turn on accessibility warnings. And when you do that, when you've introduced an accessibility issue in your email, it's going to, at the top of your email, tell you we found ways to make your email more accessible. So that's just a great visual indicator to let you know that you've got an issue that you need to resolve. It might be color contrast, alt text, something like that. And then finally, Accessibility Assistant. This is a new tool that's rolled out recently that we're really excited about. And it's going to bring accessibility checking to the forefront, similar to how spell check works today. Today, if you misspell a word, you get that instant squiggly line to let you know that you've got a misspelled word. So it's right there in Canvas. Currently with Accessibility Checker, you have to remember to run it on the back end, and we all forget. But now, if you introduce an accessibility issue, and I'm going to use a color contrast issue in Word as an example, when you introduce that issue, it's going to immediately pop up an accessibility icon on the left side of your text in the Word document itself to let you know that you've introduced a color contrast issue. When you click on it, it's going to tell you you've got a low contrast. It's going to explain what that means, why, and how to correct it. And in this example, it's going to open a complementary color palette of high contrast colors that you can select a color from. It gets applied to your text and it resolves that issue. So it's just a great way to bring accessibility checking and make it, front of mind. We don't have to remember to check accessibility on the back end. We can check it as we're going along. And what I found is that in doing this, it makes us much more aware as we're creating content to create it accessibly from the beginning. It's kind of like how we build products. We take a build it in, don't bolt it on approach. Same way with content. Create it accessibly from the beginning so we don't have to correct a lot of issues on the back end. And again, I will pause for a moment as we shift gears to ask if there are any questions or comments.
Laurie, there is one question that I wasn't able to answer. It says, does voice access include a show numbers feature like voice computer? If not, are there plans to add this functionality?
Show numbers like creating a grid on the page to then scan down or narrow down to select a certain menu option?
I'm guessing. I can ask Jen to clarify a little bit more. We can come back to it.
And I think Jen's got her hand raised. So Jen, if you want to come off mute.
Unfortunately, all their microphones are
off. Okay, so what it does do, it does, I believe, show numbers, but it definitely shows, you can say show grid, and then you can select the number and it's going to narrow it down further and further and further. And then you can press enter and it will select whatever you've narrowed it down to. And alternatively, you could press Alt, and that's going to put indicators across any button that you can take an action on, and you can select that as well using voice access.
Awesome. I think that's it.
Okay. All right, moving into accessible meetings. And these are just a few tips and tricks for how to conduct accessible meetings. You can always ask participants what kind of accommodation they need ahead of the meeting. But again, keep in mind that a lot of people may have a disability they don't want to disclose. So what we recommend is proactively in the invitation, mention which accessibility features will be available. ASL interpretation, live captions, sign language view, and you can add links so that if someone's not familiar with these features, they can go learn more about them before the meeting, and I've included those at the end of this deck as well. Again, run accessibility checker on your content because we'll all be presenting in PowerPoint Live now, and you want to be sure that that content is accessible for screen readers. This is a tricky one because many times when we're going into a meeting, we're finishing that presentation 5 minutes before. But when possible, share out your content ahead so that people have an opportunity to digest that before you're flipping through slides really quickly. Make sure that you've got adequate lighting on your speaker and that speakers have their cameras turned on for someone who might be reading lips or relying on audio cues. We recommend blurring background, again, for the example that I gave, but we've also heard from the neurodiverse community that it's less distracting when people have blur turned on, so you're not looking at what's happening or what's going on or what's on the bookshelf behind the speaker. And then one is chat. Chat is an incredibly helpful and useful tool to supplement a meeting. I don't know about your organizations, but at Microsoft on a Friday afternoon, our chats might diverge to what are you doing this weekend and which football team are you rooting for? And that can be a little bit distracting for someone who's using a sign language interpreter, who's trying to balance their attention between the slide, their interpreter, and the chat. Also, someone who might be using magnifier, who's zooming in. They're zoomed on the chat, or they're zoomed in on the slide, but they're not zoomed in on both at the same time. So just something to be mindful of. And then finally, we've got lots of accessibility resources that are available for you. Last year, we introduced a generative AI chatbot called Ask Microsoft Accessibility. And you can, and because we're in PowerPoint Live, you can click on that link right here on the slide, but we'll put it into the chat as well. But you can go in and ask Microsoft Accessibility a question about the accessibility features in our products. You can also reach out to our Disability Answer Desk or our Enterprise Disability Answer Desk. So DAD is consumer focused. So if you're at home this weekend playing with your adaptive Xbox game controller and it's not working, you can reach out to DAD. If you are at work and experiencing an issue with any of the accessibility features in our products, or just have a question, you can reach out to EDAD, as we call it, our Enterprise Disability Answer Desk. And they are a direct line back to our engineering team. So if you find an issue, they'll recreate it, they'll log that ticket back to engineering. If you have a product idea, reach out to them. They will send it to the product team for consideration for the backlog. But they're a great team to work with, and they can interact with you in whatever way is most comfortable for you. And we'll grab those links and put those into the chat as well. And then finally, we've got lots of great resources for you. We've got great training. We've got a new Accessibility 101 training that we just rolled out last year. It's about a 15-minute training. It's out on YouTube. And it's just a great Accessibility 101 training. We also have Accessibility Fundamentals training, which is a more in-depth training. It's 6 modules, everything from what is accessibility all the way through to how do I create accessible AI experiences. It's a free training. It's available on our Learn site, but it's also available in a SCORM package, which you can put right into your own learning management system so that you can track it. And then, as I mentioned, we've included links for productivity tools by application and by category, how to build accessible content, how to conduct inclusive meetings, so tips and tricks, but also the links that I mentioned that you can include in your meeting invitation for people to learn more. And then we've got a lot of different learn more links here as well. We've got a LinkedIn Learning series and a lot of content out on our Microsoft Learn site. And so with that, I will hand it back over to Jordan. And Jordan, you're on mute.
And I was muted. To answer a question I've seen a bit in the chat, just to affirm, yes, we will be sending out the PowerPoint presentation with the links after the webinar. This is in regards to, I'm actually going to address a question in the Q&A. I believe this individual is an educational developer, and they teach instructors how to use the tools, and they're referencing things that you've discussed, like cues for practicing presentations, slide design, and some of the co-pilot writing cues. Are these innate to like the Windows operating system, or if somebody was on a Mac operating system and using the Microsoft products that way, is that still accessible?
Yes, the accessibility features are available for Mac as well.
And a question that's popped up in the chat. Is there any word prediction tools specifically within the Teams LMS?
So we have in the Teams LMS. I'm not sure.
Jordan,
Nick, do you?
Jordan, repeat that question again.
Sure. Someone asked if there was any word prediction tool. I don't know if this is especially or specifically within the Teams LMS.
Yeah, so you could turn on word prediction within the Windows operating system, which would basically do that in regardless whatever you're using. So I'm guessing they're just referring to Teams as a whole, but yes.
Great. And Laura, I think we're all caught up on questions.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, I hope this was useful. I hope that people discover tools that they didn't know about that they can go leverage to support a disability or just to make us all more productive. I think live captions is such a great example. I saw some statistics that 50% of people in the US watch videos with live captions turned on. And again, if you narrow it down to like Gen Z, it's more like 80%. So you're welcome from the disabled community. But it's just a great example, of how we can all leverage these, whether we have a disability or not, to make our lives better.
Great. And if I could just squeeze one more question in there that just popped in. Does Teams have anything to support AAC users?
So is there a specific AAC you're thinking of? There are a lot of features, and I think Gabrielle's on, and we've got some links that will list out all of the things that we do support, like TTY, things like that. Yeah, we do. And I am not, I'll be honest, I am not the expert on them. But we'll grab that link for you and get it over to you.
Great. So I'll just get an opportunity for anybody who might have any outstanding questions. I'm sure you can see, Laurie, on your end, there's a lot of individuals thanking you for the information you've shared with us today. As a final reminder, once again, once the presentation and the video recording is made available, I will disseminate to all the individuals who have registered for today's webinar, who joined us today. If you can, before you leave, if you could either scan the QR code on your screen, if you can do it on your phone, or click the link to submit our lunchtime learning survey. It helps us to make sure that our content is relevant and helpful to you. If you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to Laurie, or of course, I know a lot of you have my email due to all the communication that we've been doing, so you can always feel free to reach out to me and I can connect you to the right individuals.
And Jordan, there was one question that came up that I did see that I'll address, asking if Windows 11 or 12 will improve Windows Narrator so it will compete with JAWS or NVDA. So we have a product team right now. We have voice of the employee and voice of the customers who give feedback to those product teams who are specifically working on products like Narrator. And so, we would never say that right now Narrator's on par with JAWS or NVDA. We know it's not. We are working really hard, and we have a dedicated team working to get it to parity with Narrator. And I would say the same with Dragon and Voice Access. Dragon's been around for 20 plus years. It's an amazing tool. And we have another team dedicated to bringing Voice Access to parity with Dragon. So that is in process.
Great. Well, I thank you all again for joining us today. Thank you, Laurie, so much for sharing your expertise and experiences with us. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.